Hi, it's Frances Norton for the MA in Creative Practice. This is a briefing for 703 for the part-time first year students. So the deadline for this brief, it was the 3rd of July. It's now been brought back to the 17th of July because of the COVID outbreak. So this briefing also contains some imagery from people who have done the 703 in the past. So here's one by Mark Bratcher. It's a digital image of a sculpture. So most of the information on here is on the module specification, which can be found on the eStudio portal. This module further develops the students' critical and evaluative skills as they examine the relationships between theoretical material and practice, and works towards an in-depth demonstration of these relationships in their own distinctive area of activity. So 703 is all about building on the start of your creative journey. 701 was all about experimentation and trying out materials and working with software. 703 is about building on that knowledge. This module will be focused around a prior approved practice-based project. So that just means that you have created a project proposal and that you're working with your individual supervisor to progress that. And it's of a quality and quantity appropriate to the level of study and will build upon and extend the work done for the earlier research for practice module. So yeah, just talking about you've done 702 and 701, and so you've got some theory and some practice under your belt, and now you're ready for 703, where you can really develop that initial practice. The project will be negotiated between the individual student and the specialist tutor. All projects are expected to be experimental in some respect. Experimentation may stem from the use of subject matter, choice of media, or the critical perspective adopted. So that just means that although you did a lot of practicing and sampling in 701, 703 can continue some of that experimentation. So this is a slide from Alice Fox, one of our graduates from last year, and you can see that she's working with multiples, found objects from the beach, and that she's using indexing and installation as part of her methodology. So the practical activity and professional development is based on the students' wealth of research and their critical engagement with the information, media and materials used in their art or design practice. Alongside which, the lecture seminar programme, the university's excellent range of industrial links and the visiting lecturer programme will be available as a resource. Obviously this is going to be modified due to the lockdown. So your practical activity and professional development will have to be modified to take in whatever kind of studio you have in your house. Or maybe you're using your daily walks as part of your research or study. Just that your scale of practice may be curtailed by the fact that you're living in a domestic space and trying to make artwork. The lecture series will continue as scheduled, and most of the lecturers and guest speakers have told me that they can work remotely, and so we will either film their talk, or they will do a screen sharing group chat, which I will set up and send you invitations for in due course. Students will be tutored by supervisors and MA staff, so this will continue as normal. You will have your weekly tutorials with your individual supervisor, and this will be on Google Hangouts or Google Meet or Zoom or Skype Online, whichever platform you're happiest with, or they can ring you. This is another picture from a recent student, Lewis Arnold, who's in the second year at the moment. So his project is about the ecology of the beach and surf culture around sustainability. So the aim of the module is to develop and consistently sustain the application of critical analytical judgments informed by theoretical material to the production of a body of investigative artwork. In other words, we'd like you to continue your investigations of theory and methodology and apply that to your practical work. This is an etching by Ruth Lafferty, another student from the second year. So her practice is very much grounded in traditional printmaking skills. Experimentation and resolution. The development of and the ability to evaluate critically upon image making techniques and technologies appropriate to high level practice within your chosen field. So just like 701 and 702, we do expect you to annotate your work in whatever format. So you might have a blog where you annotate, or you might have a physical sketchbook journal which you then scan, which has annotations in it, or you might choose to write a reflective report at the end of 703 outlining all your ideas and thoughts on your project. Research is really important, and the relationship between theoretical understanding, practice and self-direction in the application of theory and research to practice. Talking about there that research is a really important underpinning of all your work, and that it's good in the submission to really signpost those links between theory and practice. This next slide is another piece of printmaking by Paul Bramley. It's quite an interesting background as well. I think it's Sunnybank Mills, but I'm not quite sure. Evaluation and critical analysis. Critical evaluation of the relationship between theoretical material and practice, and the module specification, the MA Creative Practice 703, distinctive and in-depth utilisation of those relationships in your own work. So, as I was saying before, the tangible links between theory and practice that you have discovered. Subject knowledge, also really important, an in-depth knowledge relating to complex issues impacting upon specific areas of creative specialist practice, and the ability to make judgments relating to those issues. So in this little section, and when you're thinking about this for your submission, it's pointing your supervisor and second marker to where you have got really excellent subject knowledge about your particular area of practice, and just making sure that's really well signposted. This is a student from a couple of years ago, Susan Wright, working with art books, and this links in nicely to one of the last sessions that we had in the Real Studio with the librarian Nick Norton, and this special collection of books that is available there. So the indicative content for 703, studio practice modules are supported by overall lecture seminar programmes and supported by individual tutorials during which the content of the practice is negotiated. So just the continuing ongoing relationship between yourself and your MA supervisor, and the way that you can learn from each other, and you are critical friends, thinking about research and ideas and research skills together. The lecture programme will deal with issues surrounding creative and cultural practice within contemporary context, and will look at issues such as these listed below: interface between theory, research and practice, the impact of local government policy, incubation as an effective strategy for creative industries, and a written reflective review of the project. So some of our guest speakers will touch on some of these issues. I know we've got coming up a international funding and working lecture a little bit later, maybe in June. And the whole idea of incubation as effective strategy is something that is very close to our practice at the moment, as we're all social isolating. So that may be a large part of your reflection, how the lockdown has affected your project and the limitations or constraints that have now been put on your project, and how you work with that by problem solving. This is from a student from a couple of years ago, Catherine Reed, thinking about painted surface using objects and fabric captured within oil paint surfaces. So the assessment strategy is based on 100% body of work, a practice-based research project submitted digitally. Work submitted needs to demonstrate the learning outcomes indicated from the brief or the module information, which is on eStudio. Students must signpost where they are evidencing assessment criteria in their submission. Therefore, it is expected that there will be evidence of substantial development work, decision-making, planning and clear visual object-based oral or written or tactile explanations of the resolved pieces of work. Where site-specific or three-dimensional works have been undertaken, the student will need to document the work photographically or digitally for submission. This is another student, Lorna Jewett, from a couple of years ago, who used textile installation practice. So a typical body of work for 703 will normally contain evidence of practice using primary and secondary sources. This may be in the form of sketches, drawings, photographs, written notes or digitally generated imagery, of course all digitised and scanned and uploaded into a document. Evidence of the development of ideas in visual, oral, tactile or written form. Written notes should reflect on and analyse the research practice methods used as part of the module. Evidence of experimentation with technical methods, processes which are linked to research and idea development, documented elsewhere in the portfolio, digital portfolio that is. Work which demonstrates the resolution of the research, idea development and experimentation undertaken. So that doesn't mean you have to have a finished product, it just means that you've finished with the experimental part of your practice. As a coherent body of work, the elements submitted for assessment will be interrelated. Always keep looking back at your very first research proposal, and reference it backwards and forwards. How are you reflecting that or responding to it, or how have you changed from it? Or so just kind of demonstrate that in your work and in your annotations. And that's it. So 703, it's a practical module. It's about developing your practice. Think of the 5 modules as part of a whole piece, not separate pieces. They run one from the other. So your 701 work will be developed into 703 more sophisticated work, which will in turn eventually lead into your 705 final project. Don't forget you can look at the brief again on eStudio. You can get in touch if you've got any questions, and of course we'll be having our group chat regularly, so that if you have any questions you can ask them. Thanks.